This is Year 6 English for Wednesday the 13th of May, and the learning objective is I can use figurative language in a poem. Today you're going to be writing your Wild Words creature poem inspired by James Carter's poem about a grey wolf. Your learning objective is to include some figurative language, so we're going to start by thinking about what that means. One example of figurative language are similes, where you compare two different things using like or as. For example, you might say the box was as light as a feather, or his temper blazed hot like a fire. An example of a simile from James Carter's poem is, she'll leap over snow with limbs as fleet as the wind's invisible wings. Let's have a think about what that means. Fleet means quickly or swiftly, so the wolf is leaping and jumping over the snow and its legs are as quick as the wind's invisible wings. A simile doesn't have to compare something real. We know the wind doesn't really have wings, but it helps us to imagine it rushing through the air. Metaphors are another example of figurative language. A metaphor is a word or phrase used to describe something as if it was something else. It isn't literally true, but it helps to explain an idea. For example, a wave of terror washed over him, or she had a heart of stone. An example of a metaphor from She Watches the World is, she'll skulk through the night in her old winter coat beneath an ocean of sky. We know that the sky isn't really an ocean, but the poet has selected that word to help us imagine how vast it is, going on and on as far as the eye can see. Another form of figurative language is alliteration, where the sounds in a word are repeated. For example, listen as the sea surges swiftly over the sand, or she saw a shell shimmering in the shade. On Monday, we already noticed that She Watches the World uses alliteration with repeated S sounds. There's another sound that gets repeated through the poem, which is W words: watches, world, winter, wings, wisps, woods, and then finally wolf. These repeated W words help to build a quiet, haunting atmosphere in the poem and build up to the final reveal of which animal it is. You might want to pick a sound from the name of your animal that you could repeat through your poem. For example, a crafty, cunning, cautious, creeping, cruel crocodile. It's nearly time to start writing your poem, but before you begin, we'll read back through the start of James Carter's poem. She watches the world through star-gold eyes, with awe but mostly suspicion. She'll sniff at the air, she'll wait, she'll listen, she'll sense. Now it's time to start writing. You could begin with your creature looking out, like in the poem we've been looking at. Verbs like gazes, stares, surveys or scans could be useful. Then choose your habitat description. Is your creature in a forest, ocean, field or river? So for example, you might start with something like, he gazes silently over the calm currents, calculating cruelly as the river ripples past. James Carter uses the pattern of repeating verbs. She'll sniff, she'll wait, she'll listen. You could try the same thing in your poem. Now it's time to get your creature moving. Think carefully about the words you use. Does it creep or slink, bound, leap or pad? Where does it go? Think about how to describe the habitat that it lives in. Remember to look back and use the ideas that you came up with yesterday. Remember to also try to use some figurative language in your description. Can you include a simile or a metaphor? How will you end your poem? Perhaps you could describe how you feel about the animal. James Carter says that the wolf bewitches him. Will you finish with a final reveal, letting the reader know which animal you've been describing? Once you've finished writing your poem, leave it for a while and come back to it later. How does it feel now? Read it out loud to yourself. Don't be afraid to change it. You could lose or add lines, move verses round, change the title or the opening. James Carter says it took him weeks to write She Watches the World. His tip is to make sure your writing is something that you would like to read. When you have your final poem, write out a copy and illustrate it. We'd love to see examples, so don't forget to email them through to us.